Today we are doing a fraud tier list. Here we have the categories. Fraud watch is someone that is not a fraud yet, but is on our radar. We're keeping an eye out. Fraud alert is the next step. This person is moving into the potentially fraudulent category. Fraudulent, you've made it. You are officially a fraud. Major fraud means you're in the upper 80 percentile of frauds. Extremely fraudacious means you are one of the biggest frauds of all time. There's almost no merit to your skill, your talent, your hype, whatever it might be. Now, number one on the list is one of my favorite guys, but unfortunately, we are a purely scientific, non-biased channel, so I am gonna have to put this guy somewhere on this tier list. Robb Stark. Now, Robb Stark was thrust into a horrible position. His father, forced to become the King's Hand, moved to King's Landing, ends up getting betrayed, framed for something he didn't do, and then put on trial and murdered. After that, at just 13 and 14, he becomes the king, the ruler of Winterfell, and then not long after that, he becomes the king of the North in a war against the royal family, the Baratheons, the king. Very tough situation. He's forced to go around, make his rounds around the North, gather his men, prove that he is worthy to command them, and again, as an early teen, going around to grizzled war veterans, proving yourself to them, proving why they should follow you into war. And honestly, really strong start. He makes his rounds, he proves that he's worthy of the Stark name, lives up to the reputation of his father Ned Stark, and is officially named King of the North. He leads his men into a string of victories, defeats Jaime Lannister, one of the greatest knights of all time, the Kingslayer, defeats him in the field, captures him, cuts his arm off, but then just as things are reaching their peak, he makes a commitment to Walder Frey to marry one of his daughters, but then goes back on his word, goes against the Stark code, and marries Jane Westerling, some random girl that nursed his wounds when he got injured in battle. So in some sense, he stays true to his feelings, but betrays his honor as a Stark, goes back on his word to Walder Frey, and then, as we all know, major spoiler warning for Game of Thrones, the Red Wedding, he pulls up to Walder Frey, apologizes, confident that the ancient code of eating under someone's roof protects you from battle, but Walder Frey does not live by those rules. He begins to slaughter Stark and his men at the wedding, ends up decapitating him, kind of murdering his mother, and then they place his wolf's head on top of him and parade him out in the streets on top of his horse. Rough stuff for Robb Stark, pretty brutal ending, but at the same time, what makes it fraudulent is that you know what's at stake. You need the Frey men to win the war, and not only do you not get their numbers by doing this, you end up losing everything. And regardless of whether you're 13 or 14, there's bigger things on the line. The entire North has placed their trust on you, they followed you into battle, and for you to ruin things just because you fell in love with some girl, you have to know better, Robb. The Westerlings had no power, they were a useless family. There's bigger things at stake. It was a major blunder. Terrible, terrible blunder by our boy Robb. And because of that, that's pretty bad. He pretty much crippled Winterfell and most of the North, ended all of their efforts against the Baratheons when they were pretty much winning the war. He might be extremely fraudacious. I mean, that's really bad. That was a really bad whoopsie he made. Cost the North everything. Winterfell ends up getting sieged. The townfolk that he grew up with murdered by, what's his name? By Theon. All of that was because of Robb, because he wanted to marry Jane Westerling. He's going extremely fraudacious. I like him. I like the guy. You understand that he wants to live his life the way he wants. He was in love with Jane Westerling, but there's bigger things at stake, and the consequences of that action were as bad as it could possibly get. He's going extremely fraudacious. He is one of the biggest frauds of all time. Next, we have one that I've never really understood. I think most of this guy's hype just comes from his design. We have Trunks from Dragon Ball Z. Now, Trunks, we first see him when he pulls up right after the Frieza arc. Frieza comes back in his weird pieced together mech form, and Trunks shows up and just slices him up with a sword. And then he's around for the Android saga, but he's never really manages to do anything of significance. He trains with Vegeta in the hyperbolic time chamber, but then we learn that his steroid trend Super Saiyan form is actually not as good as the normal skinny Super Saiyan form. It's too bulky and slow or whatever. He gets tossed aside by Cell, and then after that he just goes home. So pretty much his best feat was just informing the Z team that the androids were coming. In fact, his feats were so bad that they had to go and give him a whole new timeline with future Trunks where he ends up avenging Gohan, and that one is pretty legit. That one is cool. But they had to give him that new storyline because I think they realized that Trunks kind of sucks. The only thing he really has going for him is that he's cool. He's got a cool outfit. He's got a sword, which is always cool. He's got the white hair. Anyone with white hair in anime, automatically cool. And his Super Saiyan form is solid. His signature move, the little burning attack where he throws like all the gang signs up, and then he does the blast, that's cool. But other than that, he has no feats. What has he ever done? But at the same time, he can't be extremely fraudacious because there's no consequences to his appearance. Nothing bad happens as a result of his actions. He's kind of just fraudulent. Like, he's pretty fraudulent. He's not a major fraud. I think he's just pretty comfortably a fraud. Next, we have any basketball player that played before 1980. Yes, that means half of Kareem's career. Yes, that means Bill Russell. Of course, that means Wilt Chamberlain. All of these guys, major frauds. In 1965, there was 6 NBA teams. There was no three-point line. We could barely even call that basketball. 11 championships, you might as well put them against the women's water polo team. The level of competition is just not there. Even the early 80s are still questionable. The only reason I'll say 1980 specifically is because you have to, at least for me, I need to base it on a specific rule. Because we can always argue style of play. Is it harder to defend all these threes? Is it harder to face Dennis Rodman who's going to bruise your ribs? Whatever. We can argue that back and forth. What we can't argue is the rules. The three-point line changes everything. Even if they weren't shooting threes early on, you still need to have the potential for making threes. Just as a guideline to where there's a game before the three-point line, there's a game after. It's like if one day we get a four-point line, that'll change everything that has to do with the three-point line era, because that changes basketball. That changes everything. It's like if they say start dribbling with your feet. Like, of course, everything before that is going to be something different. So yeah, in my opinion, 1980 is the time period. Even early 80s, the cocaine era, they're still highly questionable. If you want to argue realistically, probably 85. But there's frauds in every generation. I just think anyone from 1980 and below, automatically a fraud. Not enough NBA teams, no three-point line, no competition. And that doesn't mean they're not important. Obviously, you can only play in the era that you live in. Obviously, these guys set the foundation for the next generation. It's not like saying if you erase these guys, nothing would change. Their impact is major. I'm just saying, we now live in 2026. We can look back and say that John Havlicek cannot play today. And in 2077, when there's 15 Victor Wembanyama's, I'll have to look back and say, well, Steph Curry is not as great. He's not as great as a 7-7 3-point shooting 2K15 demigod. But until that day, he's the GOAT. So yeah, no disrespect to the legends, but in the year 2026, they can't hold up. That's why we're putting them fraudulent. Less fraudulent, you know what? No, because I think they are fraudulent. Fraudulent less than Trunks though. Okay, next we have Isaac Newton. An object at rest stays at rest. What else is supposed to happen? An object in motion stays at motion. Well, yeah, Isaac. How did it take them until 1727 to figure that one out? Now, honestly, I used to be a bigger Newton hater. I used to think he was one of the biggest frauds of all time. But I think he actually did have some pretty good accomplishments, specifically in math and calculus. Infinitesimal calculus method of fluxions. Newton created calculus in the mid-1660s to calculate changing quantities, such as the velocity of moving objects or planetary orbits. That's pretty legit. Generalized binomial theorem. In 1665, Newton expanded the existing algebraic binomial theorem to include fractional and negative exponents. Sounds pretty smart to me. Newton invented an iterative mathematical algorithm to find increasingly accurate approximations of the roots or zeros of real valued functions. Now that's pretty good. The other stuff, like, you gotta be kidding me with that. Like, it couldn't have taken us 1700 years plus to figure out, oh, if I don't move, I'm not gonna move. But yeah, figuring out, like, the math of planetary orbit is pretty legit. So we will put him on fraud alert. I don't think he's a fraud. I think the stuff he gets hyped up for is kind of fake, but overall I think he did have some pretty legit contributions, so we'll put him at fraud alert. Now this next guy is one that is near and dear to my heart specifically. Deshaun Watson, one of the all-time great Clemson quarterbacks. His best year there, 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, and he defeated the Alabama and Nick Saban in the national championship, which brought Clemson their first national championship since 1981. Even in the NFL, the dude was a beast. In 7 games as a rookie, he had 1,700 yards, 19 touchdowns, came back from a terrible injury and put together 3 really good years, peaking in 2020 where he had 4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns, and only 7 picks. But then, as we all know, this story takes a turn for the worse. The Watson files get released somewhere between 2020 and 2021. He misses pretty much 2 years, comes back in 2022 with a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract. Shout out the Cleveland Browns. Shout out his agent. Put that guy in the Hall of Fame. And then since then, he started 6 games, 6 games, 7 games. Did not play in 2025. Those years he put up 1,100 yards each season, 7, 7, and 5 touchdowns, 5, 4, and 3 picks. So Deshaun, unfortunately, as much of a college football legend as he was, he is going to have to go into the extremely fraudacious category. Not bad as Rob Stark, but not too far off. Now, this next one is another longtime favorite of mine. We have Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A, the top fast food in the United States for 11 years straight. As of just this year, no longer, edged out by Jersey Mike, who got a score of 84 out of 100. Now, it might be a little hyperbolic to call Chick-fil-A fraudulent after a 1-point drop. And that's not what I'm doing here. The one that I frequent has had a noticeable drop in quality. The last 3 or 4 times, granted, it was during pretty busy hours, it was a pretty large order. 3 times in a row, though, they got the order wrong. And also, when I got the actual sandwich, which was supposed to be a spicy pimento, they gave me a spicy. Alright, I like the spicy. For some reason, the bread, super moist. Wet bread. I don't know if it's because it's the summer, they've got some of the new high school kids in their rookie season putting up bad numbers, but it just was not good. Even the chicken itself, you could just tell for some reason the way it was packaged. The bread absorbed so much water, and then it leaked into the chicken so it wasn't crunchy. Something was just off. And then a few years ago, they had this weird thing where they went away from their no antibiotics pledge. So they pretty much now include some antibiotics. I don't know why else they would do that other than to cut costs. It says here, amid an avian flu outbreak that devastated poultry supplies nationwide, chicken farmers who previously sought to avoid antibiotics have been forced to turn to them. So for some type of flu, they're forced to include antibiotics, I guess to keep the chicken edible so that their product isn't wasted from the virus, the avian flu outbreak. I'm assuming that's what that means. But yeah, I don't think it's anything too crazy. It's not like I would never eat Chick-fil-A again. Honestly, most fast foods have been going downhill. Like Chipotle hasn't been as good. Chipotle charges like $28 for a bowl, and then when you get it, there's 3 pieces of chicken. If you work at Chipotle, please let me know why that is. Does the remaining chicken at the end of the day go to like a bonus for the workers, or like what's the reason for that? Even Jersey Mike's that took the #1 spot, again, they do when I order from there, they get it like super wet, like they drench it with the vinegar and the oil. I think fast food overall is just down, but Chick-fil-A as a whole, we're putting it on fraud watch. Somewhere between fraud watch and fraud alert, but I think it's still among the top fast foods, even though all of the top fast foods have gone a little bit downhill. So to wrap up the list, we're going with another well-known character here, the Hulk. Now the Hulk in the comics is one of the strongest characters like in the whole universe, in the whole Marvel universe. There's not that many people stronger than Hulk. And for the most parts, that held true in the movies, in the Avengers series. Hulk was up there until Infinity War. Once Hulk got the brakes beat off him by Thanos, he never came back from that, which was messed up. I think the writers did him a little dirty. Everyone got whooped, right, by Thanos. A lot of characters even got erased. Like Spider-Man was gone. Iron Man just kind of quit after that. He went to go live in the forest with his family. Captain America as the leader obviously got beat. Doctor Strange, with how OP he was, he even had the Sorcerer's Stone or whatever, or the Time Stone, whichever one he had, he got beat. Thor pulled up and was just playing Fortnite and eating Cheetos, got super fat, but all of those characters had a redemption. Iron Man came back, clutched up in the fourth quarter, and hit the game-winning shot. Thor lost his eye, got fat, but he still came back with the axe and he was doing damage in the final war. Same with Captain America. Got beat, but then he came back with the hammer, lifted Mjolnir, and was, again, he had the shield, he had the hammer, he was going in. Hulk never got the redemption. Hulk literally got beat to a pulp and then couldn't even transform. He had a dysfunction. In the final battle, he was sitting in an Iron Man mech. Hulk, we need you, buddy. The universe is on the line. You're sitting there piloting a mech. Anyone could do that. Iron Man could have made that for 50,000 normal civilians. He could have made that for a Marine, a Navy SEAL. Why was Hulk sitting in there like he's special? Crazy ending for the Hulk. Like, look at this dude. Just jolly as hell, just sitting in a giant mech. Like, this could have been any human. So yeah, because of his performance in Endgame, he is going into the major fraud category. Now, closing thoughts. If you're driving and you really gotta take a shit, like really bad, I'm not talking about like, oh, I'm kind of gassy, my stomach hurts. I'm talking about like, yo, if I don't lock in, I'm about to go. Do you pull over? Or do you just drive home faster? Like, do you just speed home? Just something that came to mind today because it happened to me. I accidentally spilled some water in my pre-workout, so it was all clumped up. So when I came to make it today, there was a huge clump at the bottom. And then I drank it and it was way too much. I was getting a little jittery. But regardless, a side effect of that was that when I was coming home from the gym, stomach in shambles. So I legit had to think like, should I pull over? And that's when I decided, no, I'm just going to lock in. Locked in, sped home, jumped into the bathroom. It was close. It was a close call, but we clutched up. But just something that I was thinking, like, which one are you? Would you speed home? Would you pull over? If you pull over, where would you pull over? But other than that, fraud tier list complete. That's about it.